After the Great Dying 252 million years ago, when almost everything unraveled, the lineage that would one day become us didn't conquer the surface, it dug into it. While others ran or fought in the open, a few small synapsids sharpened their teeth, warmed their blood, and learned to hear the world with tiny bones migrating into the ear. They didn't have mythical fangs or colossal size. They had patience, inner heat, and milk. And with those unflashy tools, they began to rewrite the planet. During the Triassic and Jurassic, giants ruled, but the night had other plans. Among leaves and roots, the mammals-to-be tried out their trades, burrowing, climbing, and gliding. When flowers arrived, and with them a sea of insects in the Cretaceous, twilight turned into a feast. And when the sky fell with the Capige asteroid and the light went out, burrows and milk did the unthinkable. They kept life going in the dark. How do you survive a global winter? How do the smallest inventions, finer hearing, a suckling young, change the fate of a lineage? This journey follows that quiet revolution. We'll watch the Therians split in two, marsupials and placentals, see the monotremes keep their ancient oddities, and witness Paleocene forests closing ranks for a world without dinosaurs on land. We'll pass through caves with the first bats that see by sound, drop down to deltas and coasts where hooves became flippers and whales were born, climb to plains and mountains where mega herbivores, carnivores, and impossible forms tried out new strategies. We'll travel to South America, home of giant ground sloths, armored glyptodonts, and terror birds. Witness the great American biotic interchange when the Isthmus of Panama sealed shut, and enter the Ice Age, where a free-handed primate, us, learned to cooperate, spark fire, and reshape ecosystems. Because the question isn't just how mammals prevailed, but why. Behind every skull lies a clever answer to cold, to scarcity, to fear. Behind every litter, a wager on the future. What do they teach us about resilience and risk in a climate that's shifting under our feet again? How do we turn sharing warmth, opening paths, and caring for the young into choices that safeguard what's left? Come with me. Let's sink our hands into the soil of a Triassic burrow, listen to how the world changed its rhythm in the night, and follow that whisper all the way to our cities. Because here nothing is lost, everything transforms, and the next chapter is ours to write, together. To understand where we come from, you have to stop the clock 252 million years ago, at the greatest extinction on record, the Great Dying. It was a colossal smear across life's notebook, and yet, when the black ink dried, some lines were written again. On a reordered planet, two synapsid lineages raised a torch, the Dicynodonts and the Cynodonts. The former, sturdy herbivores with peculiar snouts, used horny beaks to crop tough vegetation and moved in tight groups across cracked landscapes. The latter, more graceful and less known in popular lore, pursued an opportunistic life with varied teeth, versatile mobility, and insatiable curiosity. Among the Dicynodonts, Lystrosaurus, barrel-bodied and short-legged, pulled off what few animals ever have. It spread across almost the entire known world of its time. Its secret wasn't speed or size, but resilience. There was a stubbornness in its biology that let it push through those crises and thrive where others went dark. Alongside it, carnivores like Cynognathus reminded the world that synapsids hadn't renounced claws or fangs. But those who won the future didn't do it by holding their heads high. They did it by hiding them underground. Thrinaxodon, small, likely with short dark fur, dug. Not out of whim, but strategy. Beneath the soil, climate softens, predators grow clumsy, eggs and young can rest. That burrow culture, that habit of carrying home with you, not in a shell, but in the earth itself, became a thread running through our saga. Many millions of years later, the instinct would still be alive in foxes, pocket gophers, rabbits, and in animals as familiar to us as dogs, who even now bury bones, moved by an ancient echo. In the low-key forests of the early Jurassic, creatures like Morganucodon rummaged through leaves, sniffed, listened, and waited. They weren't yet modern mammals, but their jaws were telling a different story. The joint was simplifying, the chewing muscles growing stronger, and some tiny bones that once formed part of the jaw were migrating into the middle ear. That microscopic relocation transformed life. The world sounded different, sharper. The crunch of an insect under leaf litter, the brush of a tail on bark, the buzz of a wing became legible signals. Hearing better meant eating better and escaping better. With that advantage, the night stopped being an abyss and turned into a refuge. As the Jurassic hit its stride, the caste solidified. The Therians appeared, the branch that would ultimately give rise to two great lineages, marsupials and placentals. And as relics of an in-between world, the monotremes survived, mammals that lay eggs, sweat milk through specialized grooves, and live without clearly visible external ears. Their strangeness isn't a mistake. It's a tangible reminder that evolution is a weave where old and new fibers coexist. On the surface, dinosaurs set the tempo. But beneath the cool leaf litter, the ancestors of mammals rehearsed many lives, climbing with curved claws, gliding on taut membranes, biting with molars that ground seeds and chitin, stalking insects with watchmaker patience. They didn't diversify in size, but in trades. The revolution wasn't a roar, it was a long whisper, a sum of small, persistent innovations. The Cretaceous gave us an explosion of color and scent. Angiosperms, flowering plants, conquered the world. We owe them more than we admit. Fruits, protected seeds, perfumes unbearable to some and delicious to others, petal architectures that beckon pollinators. With that bloom came an ocean of insects that became a banquet for small mammals. While daylight belonged to feathered and reptilian giants, twilight teemed with quiet creatures. There were gliders crossing clearings like shadows, climbers with strong fingers reading the relief of trunks, diggers with shovel hands opening cool, safe galleries. The night was their kingdom. There, big eyes and fine hearing, those ear bones migrated early in the lineage, became decisive tools. There was no mammalian megafauna. Dinosaur dominance tolerated no large terrestrial competitors. But to mistake the absence of giants for a lack of importance is an error. In the fine weave of the forest, in the invisible tasks that make ecosystems work, those tiny gears kept the clock on time. They broke down fallen fruit before it fermented too much, kept in check insect populations that could strip new growth, and dispersed seeds, caught in their fur or ferried through their guts. Those quiet services don't make the front page of Deep Time, but without them, nothing scales up. Big history isn't always written by the big. Sometimes it's the small, the ones that fit in your hand, who hold up the foundations. And one day, the sky fell. An asteroid taller than mountains tore through the firmament and struck Earth with a violence that's hard to grasp. The shockwave woke sleeping volcanoes. Heat set forests ablaze. The atmosphere thickened with dust and aerosols that blocked the light. Without light, photosynthesis falters. Without photosynthesis, food webs collapse like scaffolding with its braces suddenly kicked out. Night seemed to lengthen, and with it the cold. In that crepuscular landscape with ash-laden air and ground carpeted in debris, the first army to march again had no leaves or claws. Fungi. They ruled decomposition, recycled nutrients, and fed swarms of insects that chewed dead wood and waste with ruthless efficiency. But where there are insects, there are openings for Therians. Mammalian endothermy allowed activity despite the cold. Their burrows offered thermal refuge and protection from toxic ash rains. Their flexible diets were a lifeline. They survived. And from that scarcity of opportunities, they grew. In that disaster economy, milk became an unexpected advantage, safe, clean, portable energy for vulnerable young in an unpredictable world. If the external chain wobbled, maternal bodies offered an internal chain, intimate and sufficient. From here on, the board was no longer the same. Non-avian dinosaurs went out. The birds that remained filled the skies. And on land, mammals stepped forward. With the climate warm and humid again, and no ice at the poles, the sea level rose. Without dinosaur herds trampling everything in their path, forests thickened. The world returned to a three-dimensional maze of branches, trunks, vines, and occasional clearings. There, mammalian anatomy found a paradise. Hands that grasp with precision, feet that absorb impact and climb, jaws with specialized teeth that grind tough fibers and shells. Body sizes grew. Where there had been mice, there were now capybara-sized bodies. Where there had been nocturnal opportunists, there appeared herbivores weighing tens to hundreds of kilos, capable of opening clearings and reshaping vegetation. Pantodonts like Barilambda opened a new chapter, Cenozoic megafauna. Their passage carved paths, marked territories, and set the rhythms of plants and seasons. But for a time, the apex predator's crown rested on a reptile, Titanoboa, the colossal snake of equatorial swamps. Its mere existence was a reminder that evolution recognizes no acquired rights. No one holds the crown by inheritance. It sits with whoever best fits that moment and place. Yet between the end of the Paleocene and the start of the Eocene, a lineage appeared that defies our senses: bats. The oldest fossils already show functional wings and often echolocation. Seeing by sound sounds like science fiction, but it's a perfect craft for those who haunt the night caves and dense forests. As the planet learned to breathe again, these small air architects traced invisible routes. Over time, they came to represent 1 in every 5 living mammals. They're not mere insect eaters, some sip nectar with long tongues. Others are frugivores that plant forests by dispersing seeds in flight. Some fish still waters, and a few even hunt small vertebrates. In their diversity beats a message: where there is darkness, mammals find ways to survive. The Eocene, for its part, began with a thermal lash known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Biomes shifted, conditions turned extreme, and species responded by moving or changing. In that context, the Indian subcontinent, still an island, became a laboratory for something that seems impossible at first glance. Soft-bodied, even-toed mammals ventured into fresh water, then estuaries, then coasts, and finally the open ocean. In a few million years, whales were born. At first, they kept legs, then reduced them, then reinforced the tail and shaped it into a vertical fluke. The nostrils migrated to the crown and became blowholes, letting them breathe without lifting the whole head. Names now famous, Pachycetus, Ambulocetus, Basilosaurus, tell this metamorphosis in fossil chapters. Basilosaurus, serpentine and huge, hunted as a lord of the sea. Then the lineage split along 2 grand paths: Odontocetes, with sophisticated echolocation and dentition for catching mobile prey, and Mysticcetes, with filtering baleen able to turn a cloud of microlife into colossal energy. At last, the sea had giant mammals. On land, creativity never rested. Dinoceratans appeared with heavy skulls, improbable weaponry, and faces that demanded a second look. Brontotheres with protuberances for display, intimidation, and clash. Herbivores that tried on horns, tusks, prehensile lips, ever-growing teeth, and complex social habits. Form riffed through an exuberant catalogue, and function followed with artisan punctuality. Life seemed to play with modular pieces. Here a longer neck, there a different pelvis, elsewhere a brand new dentition. In that combinatorial game, mammals revealed their big secret. They aren't a shape so much as a platform for invention. But when India rammed into Asia, the Himalayas were born, and erosion of those young mountains loaded rivers with minerals that fed the sea. The oceans, with altered chemistry, produced plankton booms that in turn sequestered carbon and helped drive a slow global cooling. At the planet's far south, Antarctica isolated itself. A powerful, continuous circumpolar current wrapped it like an icy belt. Snow, piled up millennium after millennium, turned to ice. A bright surface reflected more sunlight to space, reinforcing the cooling. In short, the planet installed air conditioning. Against that backdrop, faunas changed both caste and script. On southern coasts, giant penguins filled roles later taken by seals and sea lions. In the northern hemisphere, geography behaved like an accordion, sometimes joining lands, sometimes parting them. Across those bridges and breaks, carnivores and ungulates traded places feverishly. The perissodactyls, horses, rhinos, tapirs and kin, pushed form to the limit with Paraceratherium, a high-necked giant with strong lips that likely stripped branches like a giraffe without spots. Among artiodactyls, the fan spread into proboscideans with tusks of every shape, amphibious hippos, desert camels, and bovids that turned grass into muscle and speed. Pinnipeds, an experiment in a second conquest of the sea, evolved from bodies still close to a robust otter into sleek torpedoes fit for surf and ice. In parallel, Sirenians, sea cows, grazed underwater meadows with a calm that is itself a strategy. None of this was instant. It took millions of years of trial and error, local triumphs and dead-end losses. But by the end of that stretch, the world felt different. Colder, drier at some latitudes, more open to grass and to running. Meanwhile, South America lived a story apart. Isolated for tens of millions of years, it cultivated a fauna that now reads like a fable. Their evolution was written with dark humor and daring. Meridiungulates, native hoofed mammals, arose that mimicked without being related to horses, tapirs, rhinos, and even elephants. Macrauchenia, with its elegant neck and singular snout, walked windswept pampas. Astropotherium, possibly short-trunked, browsed damp regions, heavy and sure. Toxodon, massive with powerful teeth, perplexed more than one naturalist who first saw its skull and didn't know which evolutionary drawer to file it in. Xenarthrans, the group we know today as sloths, armadillos, and anteaters, put on an epic show. Ground sloths like Megatherium, capable of rearing up and toppling branches like colossal gardeners, giant armadillos like Glyptodon, true armored tanks whose relatives such as Dodecurus wielded spiked mace tails. But the surprises didn't stop there. One armadillo, Macroeophractus, broke the family rule and went carnivorous, with teeth and jaw muscles built to hunt. On that continent, dinosaurs returned as apex predators, but this time in the form of terror birds, Phorusrhacids up to 3 meters tall, with beaks built to tear and strides that sealed a chase's fate. They weren't alone either. Sebecids, terrestrial crocodile relatives, joined in, sprinting ambushers with tall skulls and slicing teeth. And in the northwest, a mega-wetland geologists called the Pebas system offered an aquatic stage for colossi like Purosaurus, a cyclopean caiman, and Stupendomes, a giant turtle sailing turbid waters like an ancestral barge. South America wasn't pure endogamy. From Africa, when the Atlantic was narrower, primates and rodents arrived on rafts of vegetation torn away by storms. They landed in new worlds and flourished. The primates became New World monkeys, complete with acrobatics and prehensile tails. The rodents gave rise to capybaras, pacas, chinchillas, tangles of forms adapted to rivers, mountains, and grasslands. The island continent assembled its own choir, and its music, though distinct, belonged to the same mammalian concert. At the same time, while cetaceans ruled the open ocean, pinnipeds colonized the edges, cold islands, windy beaches, sea ice that came and went with the seasons. Unlike whales, they needed to return to land to breed. Their bodies struck compromises between two worlds. Hands turned to flippers, a pelvis still good enough for haul-outs, skin negotiating between insulation and hydrodynamics. There they raised noisy, complex colonies, with hierarchies and scuffles, where pups learned to swim the way others learned to walk. In temperate and fresh waters, Sirenians grazed seagrass meadows with the unhurried patience the sea allows. For centuries, for instance, a gentle Arctic giant, the Steller's sea cow, survived. Its story ended in the 18th century, and its absence serves as a mirror. Where humans arrive without restraint, natural history shortens. With the Pliocene and Pleistocene, the planet took on familiar contours. The Isthmus of Panama closed, and the Great American Interchange unfolded. Northern faunas moved south, southern faunas moved north. Cats, dogs, camels, and tapirs set foot on new ground. Giant sloths, glyptodonts, and terror birds explored boreal territories for a time. In Africa, under wide skies and seasonal grasslands, bipedal hominins emerged. Australopithecus was a decisive step in the history of walking. Then came Homo, and with it, something different. Hands that shaped stone, fire that shaped landscapes, ideas that shaped tribes. We walked upright, freed our hands for tools, domesticated fire, and lent other animals our social intelligence. We hunted cooperatively, shared food, learned how to learn, and accumulated culture. Wherever we went, ecosystems changed, and sometimes too fast to recover. The so-called Ice Age wasn't a solid block of cold, but an alternation of planetary breaths, long glaciations followed by brief, warmer interglacials. With each swing, biomes shifted like sheets on a vast bed. Megafauna, woolly mammoths, steppe rhinos, giant sloths, glyptodonts, enormous deer faced a double squeeze, a fickle climate and an encounter with a versatile, efficient primate. Extinctions cascaded. In some places, our species was decisive. In others, climate did most of the work. The result was the same, a world with fewer colossi and, in many cases, less ecological redundancy. We finally entered the Holocene with agriculture, villages, then cities, and at last a planet interlinked by roads, cables, and invisible waves. The surviving megafauna, elephants that remember their dead and explore with curious trunks, rhinoceroses in armored hides, amphibious hippos with ancient tempers, great whales that cross oceans by biological compass, bears that read the seasons, cats that vanish like shadows, now live a fragility unseen in tens of millions of years. There are fewer places to be big, fewer corridors to migrate, more invisible fences of noise, light, and pollution. And yet here is a radical difference. Unlike an asteroid we can choose. We can protect migration corridors for elephants and antelopes that have moved along the same invisible paths for generations. We can restore seagrass meadows for manatees and whales, meadows that capture carbon and return oxygen without speeches. We can rein in unsustainable hunting and the illegal trade that empties forests and savannas before dawn. We can honor and learn from local cultures that, for generations, have cared for forests, paramos, and deserts with the wisdom of many small, accumulated decisions. We can redesign cities to be porous to life, with green roofs, restored riverbanks, night gardens that don't blind insects, lights that let bats orient, parks that connect neighborhoods and also bird populations. We can plant native trees where there are now tiles and find beauty in cycles, not just straight lines. The story of mammals is our story. It isn't written in a foreign tongue. It's written in the temperature of our blood, in the curiosity of our hands, in our capacity to form a tribe, to tell stories, to care. All of those are evolutionary tools. Now, they're ethical tools as well. The same impulse that made a burrow a warm refuge can turn a watershed into a sanctuary today. The same ingenuity that turned a limb into a flipper can turn an economy into an ally of the forest. The same cooperation that brought down a mega herbivore can raise a conservation network that holds up entire species. Think of it this way. What we call mammal is a pattern that life has learned to fill with 1,000 answers. It's a flexible mold that admits bats that aren't birds, whales that aren't fish, bears that dive more than we imagine, rats that glide like silent kites, and dogs that howl stories in the snow to keep the pack together. It's a mold that admits us, hands for clay and metal, eyes for the night sky, voices that can promise and deliver. The Cenozoic wasn't a quiet reign. It was a creative war against climate, geography, and chance. And still, mammals persisted. Every burrow, every litter, every sip of warm milk was a vote of confidence in the future. We're made of that insistence. We carry it in the skin that prickles when the temperature drops. We carry it in the pulse that quickens when we run. We carry it in the pleasure of warming, feeding, and sheltering the small and unprotected who arrive. History doesn't oblige us. It invites us. It reminds us that every line we now take as enduring was once an experiment. The tiny bones in our ears were once part of different machinery. That the planet we inhabit was for ages too hot or too cold, too wet or too dry, and that life found ways to go on. If mammals teach us anything, it's that the greatest strength doesn't always lie in muscle, but in the ability to reshape surroundings with intelligence, to share warmth, to hold one another up with patience. From the first warm burrow under the Triassic night to the shared heartbeat of our cities, mammals didn't inherit Earth, they rebuilt it. And their victory won't be brute force, but memory that chooses to protect. Because if this lineage proved anything, it's that the world can fall and rise again. That light can go out and yet ignite inside a beating chest. That a youngster can survive if someone shelters it. That a forest can be reborn if someone scatters its seed. Our last chapter isn't written yet, and maybe that's the best news of all.